Hey everyone, Sarah here. Rewind Justice brings you revenge stories that will blow your mind. If you're ready, hit subscribe and let's go.
My mother smiled at the podium the way she smiles when she is most certain she is right about something. Warmly, openly, with the full confidence of a woman who has never once considered that the room might not share her assumptions. Grace teaches, she said. It's adorable, really. Not everyone is built for ambition. 200 people applauded. My husband Elliot didn't look up from his water glass. Outside, on the marquee above the entrance of the Harrington Convention Center in downtown Indianapolis, in letters large enough to read from the parking structure across the street, the sign read, Elliot Crane Foundation Annual Education Summit, 7th year. My father hadn't read it on the way in. He read it on the way out. But I need to start before that. I need to start with the version of my family that existed before that evening, because the evening only means something if you understand what it was built on top of. My name is Grace Crane. I am 33 years old. I grew up in Carmel, Indiana, the younger of two daughters born to Robert and Vivian Alderton. My father spent 30 years as a cardiovascular surgeon at Indiana University Health before transitioning into hospital administration, which in practice meant he spent 30 years being the most accomplished person in any room he entered and 1 year becoming the second most accomplished. My mother taught French literature at Butler University for 26 years and then stopped, which she describes as retirement and which everyone in the family understands to mean that she had decided the university no longer deserved her, a distinction that matters to her even if it doesn't alter the practical outcome. They're not bad people. I want to say that before I say anything else because the story I am telling is not a story about monsters. My parents are intelligent, accomplished, and genuinely loving in the way that people can be genuinely loving and still be profoundly careless about something that matters enormously. The carelessness is the story. Not the malice. There was no malice. There was something more difficult to argue against, which was absolute certainty, the kind that doesn't announce itself as a position because it doesn't know it is one. It just presents as fact. The fact in my family was this. My older sister Diana was the daughter who had inherited the Alderton blueprint for success. She was a thoracic surgeon at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta. She had published 43 peer-reviewed papers by the age of 38. She had 2 children, a husband who was a professor of bioethics at Emory, and the kind of life my parents described, when they described it to anyone, as everything they had hoped for. Not for Diana specifically, for themselves. Diana was the proof that the blueprint worked. I was the teacher. This framing arrived early and stayed late. I don't mean my parents were actively dismissive. I mean they had a category for what I did, and the category was smaller than what I actually did, and they never noticed the gap because they never looked. When I was 24 and finishing my master's in education policy at Indiana University, my mother told a dinner party that I was going to be a schoolteacher, with a warmth in her voice that was entirely genuine and that carried, underneath it, the specific warmth of someone describing a life that has been correctly limited. Not wrong. Just correctly sized. Just right for what Grace could manage. I started teaching 3rd grade at Meridian Elementary in Indianapolis in 2015. I taught there for 4 years and I was, by every measurable standard and several unmeasurable ones, very good at it. My students' reading scores moved. My classroom had a particular quality that other teachers commented on. Not chaos-free, which is not the goal, but purposeful. Children in my classroom understood that their thinking mattered. That the quality of an argument mattered more than the confidence with which it was delivered. I taught them to read and I taught them to think about what they read and I taught them that these were not separate skills. This is harder than it sounds and more important than almost anything else an adult can do for a 9-year-old. And I knew that then and I know it now, and the knowing has never required my parents to share it. I met Elliot at a conference in 2016. He was presenting a paper on philanthropic funding models for public education, specifically on why most foundation grants to K-12 education failed to produce lasting change at the classroom level, and what structural changes in how money flowed from donors to districts might actually make a difference. I was in the audience because the paper directly intersected with frustrations I had been carrying for 2 years about the gap between what policy promised and what teachers actually received. I asked a question during the Q&A that apparently surprised him. He told me later that most questions at those sessions were softballs and mine was not. We had coffee afterward that turned into dinner that turned into a 4-hour conversation in a hotel lobby about every structural failure in American public education funding and what a differently designed intervention might accomplish. He had ideas about the money, I had ideas about the classroom. Neither set of ideas was complete without the other. We married in 2018. Elliot had founded the Crane Foundation in 2014, 2 years before we met. I need to describe it accurately, which means I need to resist both underselling it and overselling it, because the truth is more interesting than either. The Crane Foundation was not, when he started it, large. It was Elliot and one part-time program coordinator and a donor base of 11 people, mostly former colleagues from his time in private equity, operating out of a rented office in Broad Ripple with a first-year grant budget of $340,000. He had left a career that was paying him considerably more than $340,000 because he had decided at 31 that the thing he was doing with his time did not match the thing he cared about, and he had the particular kind of stubbornness that allows a person to act on that conclusion rather than just think it. By the time we married, the foundation had a budget of $4.2 million and was operating in 11 school districts across Indiana and Ohio. By the time of my mother's speech, the foundation's annual grant budget was $31 million, its endowment had reached $174 million, and the Elliot Crane Foundation Annual Education Summit, held every October at the Harrington Convention Center in downtown Indianapolis, was in its 7th year, with 200 educators, policy researchers, district superintendents, and philanthropic leaders in attendance. The summit had a waiting list. The Harrington had been reserved 3 years in advance. The marquee above the entrance had displayed Elliot's name every October for 7 consecutive years. My parents had attended the summit twice before. I want to be precise about this, because it is the part of the story that I have thought about most. My parents had attended the summit in its 4th year and its 5th year. They had sat in the audience. They had read the program. They had seen Elliot's name on the building. My father had shaken hands with the lieutenant governor at the 4th-year reception. My mother had spoken with 3 university department chairs at the 5th-year cocktail hour. They had returned home both times and said that it was a lovely event and that Elliot clearly worked very hard at his little foundation, and neither of them had at any point looked at the marquee and connected it to the question of what their son-in-law actually was. This is what I mean by a category. When you have decided what something is, you stop seeing the evidence that it is something else. The marquee was just decor. The program was just paper. The 200 attendees were just a crowd. None of it penetrated the category of Elliot's little foundation because none of it was being looked at with eyes that were open to revision. The 7th-year summit was in October. My mother's invitation to speak had come through the foundation's speaker coordination process. Elliot had asked her 18 months prior, knowing that her 26 years of experience in education at the university level was genuinely relevant to the summit's programming, and knowing, also, that she had never been asked to take his work seriously in any concrete form and that this was a concrete form. He didn't tell me he'd invited her until after she'd accepted. When he told me, I sat with it for a while and then said, "Oi," because it was okay. Because my mother is genuinely knowledgeable about education. Because the invitation was honest and the forum was real and whatever happened would happen in front of 200 people who actually understood what the Crane Foundation was, which is more than I could say for any other room my parents had ever occupied in relation to our lives. My mother prepared her remarks for 3 weeks. He sent me a draft. It was good. Substantive, specific, drawing on her research and her years in the classroom. I told her so honestly. She thanked me and said she was glad her experience could be useful to Elliot's little project. I didn't correct the word little. We drove to the Harrington together on the morning of the summit. My parents were staying at the hotel attached to the convention center. Elliot had arranged rooms for all the out-of-town speakers. The 4 of us arrived together in a car my father drove, pulling up to the main entrance on Capitol Avenue just after 8:30 in the morning. The marquee was visible from half a block away. Elliot Crane Foundation Annual Education Summit, 7th year. The letters were black on white, the standard marquee format, clean and large. My father pulled into the drop-off lane. He was looking for the entrance. He was not looking at the marquee. My mother was checking her phone. Elliot looked out the window at the sign. He didn't say anything. He had said nothing about the sign ever to my parents, not once in 7 years. Because he has the particular quality of someone who builds things and waits for people to notice them on their own terms. He has never found it necessary to point to what he has built. He builds it and it exists and either you see it or you don't, and he is at peace with both outcomes in a way that I have spent 7 years trying to learn from. We went inside. The summit ran from 9 to 5 with a speaker program, breakout sessions, a working lunch and an evening reception. My mother was scheduled to speak on the main stage at 2:15. A 20-minute address on the structural gap between university teacher preparation programs and actual classroom demands, a topic she knew deeply and spoke about well. I sat in the third row with Elliot. My father was on the aisle. My mother was backstage. The morning sessions were excellent. A superintendent from Columbus presented 3 years of data on a reading intervention program that had moved third-grade proficiency scores in her district from 41% to 68%. A policy researcher from University of Michigan presented a paper on the mismatch between standardized assessment design and the actual cognitive development of 7 to 9-year-olds, which is something I have believed for the entirety of my teaching career and was grateful to hear documented in 40 pages of rigorous methodology. The room was attentive and engaged in the way that rooms are when the people in them have come because they care about the subject, not because they were required to be there. My father sat through the morning sessions with the polite attention of a man at a conference in a field adjacent to his own. He asked me at the working lunch what the Foundation's relationship was with the Indiana Department of Education. I explained it. The Crane Foundation had a formal partnership with the department dating to the Foundation's 5th year, including a jointly administered grant program that had funded 47 classroom innovation projects across the state. My father nodded. He said it seemed like Elliot had done something real with the foundation. I agreed that he had. My mother took the stage at 2:15. She was poised and prepared and she spoke well. I watched 200 education professionals listen to her with genuine attention, which is not something that happens automatically in a room of experts and which she had earned with the quality of her material. I was proud of her for it. The complicated love, again sitting in the third row. The love that doesn't require the person to be uncomplicated in order to be real. She was near the end of her remarks. She had spoken about teacher preparation, about the university curriculum gap, about what she had observed in 26 years of watching education students move from her classroom to real classrooms and discover the distance between theory and practice. She was building toward a conclusion. The room was with her. And then she looked out at the audience and she saw me in the third row and something moved across her face. A warmth, a softness, the particular tenderness my mother has always been capable of and which has always been accompanied by its shadow, the thing underneath it that she doesn't know is there, and she departed from her prepared remarks. I'll confess, she said, smiling, that I have a personal connection to education in this room. My daughter Grace is here today. She gestured toward me. 200 heads turned. Grace teaches. It's adorable, really. The smile widened. Not everyone is built for ambition. Some of us are built to nurture. And that is its own kind of gift. 200 people applauded. Elliot did not look up from his water glass. I looked at my hands in my lap. They were still. I made a point of that, of finding the stillness in my hands and staying there. My father was on the aisle. I didn't look at him. My mother finished her remarks. She returned to her chair at the side of the stage. The applause was genuine. She had given a good speech. The conclusion she had been building toward was solid and specific and she had delivered it well. The departure from prepared remarks, the 30 seconds of adorable and not built for ambition, had not diminished the speech. But it had hung in the room the way that certain sentences hang, not in the air exactly but in the body of the person they were said about. I felt it in my sternum. Specific and locatable. The way a thing lands when you have been absorbing versions of it for 33 years. The afternoon sessions continued. I participated. I asked 2 questions from the audience during the final panel, a discussion on school board governance and philanthropic accountability, and both questions were substantive and drew substantive responses, and the panelist who answered the second one said, "That's exactly the right frame for this problem," which is the kind of thing said in rooms like that only when it's true. My father was watching me. The reception began at 5:30 in the Harrington's East Ballroom. Elliot moved through the room the way he always moves through his own events. Not working it exactly but available, stopping where stopping was needed, brief where brief was appropriate, extended where someone needed more. He has been doing this for 7 years and he is good at it in the specific way that people are good at things they care about rather than things they perform. My mother found me near the drinks table around 6. She was glowing slightly. The glow of someone who has given a speech that went well and is receiving the accumulated warmth of 200 people who want to tell her so. Several attendees had approached her already. One department chair from Purdue had exchanged cards with her. She was, in the best version of herself, and I watched her be it with the complicated love in full operation. "Grace," she said. "What a room. Elliot has really done something with this." "He has," I said. "The Columbus superintendent," she said. "Those numbers are extraordinary." "They are," I said. "The intervention model is something Elliot's foundation helped design. He brought in the curriculum consultants in 2021. She looked at me. "Processing." "He designed the intervention? Funded it? Brought the team together? Stayed involved for 2 years while they iterated?" I picked up a glass of water. "He does that with most of the programs. He doesn't just write checks. He stays in the work." She was quiet for a moment, looking across the room at Elliot, who was standing with a cluster of superintendents, listening to someone with the full attention he gives to things he has decided deserve it. "I didn't know that," she said. "You didn't ask," I said, gently. "The same gentleness as always, the gentleness that is not softness but precision, the exact right amount of force for the exact right point." She looked at me. "At the podium," she said. What I said. "Adorable." "Mom," I said. "I didn't mean." "I know what you meant," I said. "And I know what it sounded like. And I know you have been saying versions of it since I was 24 years old without knowing that you were saying anything at all." Kept my voice even. 200 people heard it tonight. People who know what Elliot has built. People who know what a classroom teacher contributes to what he builds. They heard you describe me as adorable. She pressed her lips together. "I'm telling you because you should know how it lands," I said. "Not to wound you. Because you should know." "Grace," she said. Her voice had something in it I recognized from early childhood. Not the managed warmth, not the performance of tenderness, but the real thing that lived underneath both, the thing that came out rarely and always surprised me when it did. "I am sorry." "I know," I said. "I have been." She stopped. "I haven't been looking at what you do, at what Elliot does. I've had a picture in my head and I've been describing the picture instead of looking at the actual thing." "Yes," I said. She was quiet. "Then, what do you do?" "Shli. Tell me. I want to know." It was the first time she had asked. I looked at her for a moment. Really looked the way you look at someone when you're deciding how much trust to extend. She looked back. She had the expression of someone who has set down a heavy thing and is standing differently without it. "Come to my classroom," I said. "In November when we start the argument unit. Come for a morning. Sit in the back. Watch what happens when 32 9-year-olds learn how to build a case." I paused. "And then ask Elliot about the curriculum framework. Ask him what the foundation's programs are built on. Ask him where the ideas come from." She nodded. Not the social nod, the real one. "And Mom," I said. "The adorable thing. It needs to stop. Not managed down. Stopped." "Yes," she said. "It stopped." I believed her. Not because she had never let me down before, she had many times in this specific way, but because she had asked the question. The actual question. What do you do? In 33 years she had not asked it, and tonight she had, and a question like that costs something to ask when you have spent 33 years not asking it, and I had watched it cost her. That counted. My father found me near the exit at 7:30. He had his coat over his arm. My mother was saying goodbye to the Purdue department chair. The reception was winding down, the room thinning, the particular end-of-conference energy of people gathering themselves back into their ordinary lives. He stood beside me for a moment looking out at the room. "The marquee," he said. "Yes," I said. "I drove past it this morning," he said. "I was looking for the entrance." "I know. I read it on the way out." He was quiet. "Elliot Crane Foundation. I have been calling it his little foundation for..." He stopped. "How long has the endowment been at that level?" 3 years, I said. He absorbed that. "And you've known." "I live with him," I said. "I know what he builds." "You helped build it," he said. It was not a question. He had listened, I realized, more carefully than I had thought during the afternoon sessions. He had watched me ask the questions from the audience. He had heard the panelist respond. "The curriculum framework is mine," I said. "The classroom research. The design principles the foundation's programs are built on. Elliot funds and structures and leads. I provide the map." My father looked at the room for a long moment. He is a man who has spent 30 years being right about things. Being right was not a personality trait for him. It was a professional requirement, the kind trained into surgeons and administrators who cannot afford the consequences of error. This meant that being wrong was not something he had developed a fluent relationship with. I watched him work toward fluency in real time, standing at the edge of a ballroom at 7:30 on an October evening. I should have asked, he said. Yes, I said. You should have. Will you let me, he said. Ask now. Properly. I want to understand what you have both built. Yes, I said. Come to Indianapolis in November. Stay with us. Not a dinner out, our home. Let Elliot show you the foundation's work. Let me show you the classroom. Give it 2 days. He looked at me. 2 days. 2 days, I said. And Dad. What Mom said tonight. From the podium. You heard it. I heard it, he said. His jaw tightened slightly. I should have said something. Yes, I said. You should have. In the future I need you to say something. In the future when you hear it from her or from anyone. I need you to be the person in the room who corrects it. He held my gaze. I will be, he said. I believed him. My father is a man who does not make commitments he does not intend to keep. This is one of the most reliable things about him and one of the reasons his oversight has been, in some ways, more painful than outright dismissal. A man who keeps his commitments has no excuse for failing to make the right ones. We shook hands, which is how my father and I have always closed conversations that matter. Not a hug, not a formal bow, just the grip of two people who have agreed on something and are sealing it. Elliot was waiting by the car. We drove home through downtown Indianapolis, the city lit and quiet in the particular way of a weeknight after an event, the streets belonging to people heading somewhere rather than somewhere specific. I watched the convention center recede in the side mirror. The marquee was still lit. Elliott Crane Foundation Annual Education Summit. White letters on black. Visible for 3 blocks. In the car Elliot said nothing for the first few minutes. He drove the way he always drives, with complete attention, both hands, no music. Then he said, "Your father shook your hand." "He did," I said. "That's different," he said. "Yes," I said. "That's different." We drove the rest of the way home without talking, which is its own kind of conversation between people who have been married long enough to know the difference between silence that is empty and silence that is full. My mother came to the classroom in November. She arrived at 8:15 on a Thursday, signed in at the front office, wore a visitor badge and sat in the back corner of room 7 at Meridian Elementary for 2 hours. I was in the middle of the argument unit. Day 4, the day we moved from identifying claims to evaluating evidence. 32 9-year-olds were arguing about whether school lunch should be free for every student regardless of income, which is the prompt I have used for 3 years because it generates genuine disagreement and because the disagreement is about something real. A girl named Simone, who is 9 years old and has the instincts of someone who has been in too many arguments that didn't follow rules, said to a boy named Xavier, "Your evidence doesn't prove your claim, it only proves something next to your claim." Xavier looked at her. He thought about it. He said, "You're right." He revised his argument on the spot. I looked at my mother in the back corner. She was watching Xavier revise his argument. Her expression was not the adorable expression. It was not the warmly limited expression. It was the expression of a person who has been a teacher herself for 26 years and is watching something that she knows, professionally and without sentimentality, is excellent. The recognition of a practitioner. Not indulgent. At the end of the session, when the students had gone to art, she sat in the back corner for a moment without getting up. I walked to the back of the room and sat in the student chair beside her. She said, "Simone." "Yes," I said. "Where did she learn to do that?" "Here," I said. "She learned it here. This year." At the beginning of September she would have said Xavier was wrong and moved on. She learned to say what she said today over 10 weeks. My mother looked at the board where I had written the day's argument framework. Claim. Evidence. Warrant. Rebuttal. The words in blue marker, the way I always write the things I want to stay up the longest. "You taught her that," she said. "Yes," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I have been saying adorable for 9 years." "Yes," I said. "It was wrong," she said. Not an apology shaped like an explanation. Just the fact. "Yes," I said. "I'm sorry, Grace." I know, I said. She looked at the board for another moment. At the 4 words. Claim. Evidence. Warrant. Rebuttal. Your students are lucky, she said. It was the truest thing she had said to me in 9 years, and she said it simply without decoration the way true things should be said. I didn't thank her for it. I didn't minimize it. I just let it be what it was. My father came in December. He and Elliot spent a full day at the Foundation's office. Elliot walked him through 7 years of program data, the grant methodology, the curriculum frameworks I had developed, the district partnership structures, the endowment composition. My father asked questions for 6 hours. Real questions, the kind that require the other person to go deeper rather than the kind that signal you've understood enough to move on. Elliot answered every one. That evening my father sat at our kitchen table and looked at a 7-year program outcomes report that Elliot had printed for him, and he read it the way he reads surgical literature. Slowly going back, not moving forward until the current thing was understood. He set it down. He said, "You built this together." Elliot said, "Grace built the foundation. I built the structure around it." My father looked at me. Not the floor-shifting look. He had already done that in October in the ballroom. This was something else. Something further along. The look of a man who has revised a story and is now living inside the revision, finding out what it feels like. "I want to be useful to this," he said. "If there's a way. I have hospital administration relationships across the state. Health-adjacent education research. I don't know if that's relevant to what you do." Elliot looked at me. I looked at him. "Tell us about the relationships," Elliot said. My father told us. We listened for an hour. 2 of the connections were genuinely relevant to a program Elliot was building in partnership with Riley Hospital for Children's Developmental Pediatrics Department, which had been looking for an external education consultant for 8 months. My father knew the program director. He offered to make an introduction. Elliot said, "We'd welcome that." My father called the program director the following week. The introduction was made. The conversation is ongoing. This is not a story about my father becoming useful to our work as a form of redemption. I want to be clear about that. The work existed before he knew about it and would have continued without him. What his usefulness meant was something smaller and more real. That the revision of the story had moved from the acknowledgement stage into the daily stage. The stage where the corrected understanding becomes the operating assumption rather than the recent discovery. The daily stage is harder. It requires more from everyone. It is also the only stage where anything actually changes. I went back to my classroom the Monday after my father's December visit. We were finishing the argument unit and beginning the research unit, which in my classroom means teaching children how to find sources and how to evaluate whether a source is worth trusting, which is the skill that will matter most to them for the rest of their lives regardless of what they do with it. I wrote on the board that morning before anyone arrived. How do you know if something is true? I stepped back and looked at it. I thought about the marquee. Elliott Crane Foundation Annual Education Summit. 7th year. I thought about my mother at the podium and my father in the drop-off lane not reading the sign. I thought about 9 years of adorable and 7 years of little foundation and how a category can hold for a very long time if nobody stops to check whether it still fits. How do you know if something is true? You look at it. Directly. Without the category you brought with you. You ask the question you should have asked at the beginning. My students arrived at 8:15. Simone came in first. She read the board. He thought about it. She took out her notebook. She didn't ask me what I meant. She already knew. That was enough. That has always been enough. Type enough in the comments if someone described your life as adorable before they ever looked at what you were actually building.